Grandma's casserole doesn't match the aesthetic, my daughter-in-law whispered. And that was the moment I realized my place in the family had been quietly thrown away long before I found my food in the trash. I had been up since 5 that morning in my small yellow kitchen, the one with the worn oak table and the window above the sink that looked out over my rose bushes. I stood there in my apron, rolling out biscuit dough, layering cheese, stirring the sauce slowly the way my granddaughter Chloe liked it, because for as long as she could remember, I had brought something homemade to every one of her birthdays. When she was 6, it was peach cobbler. When she turned 10, it was baked macaroni with the crispy top she used to pick at first with her little fork. This year, for her 13th birthday, I made my Sunday lasagna. The one she once told me tasted like comfort. I packed it carefully into a foil pan, wrapped it in 2 kitchen towels to keep it warm, and set it on the passenger seat beside a gift bag filled with watercolor pens and a sketchbook I had saved up to buy because Chloe loved to draw. The drive to Daniel's house took 20 minutes, past the grocery store, the elementary school, and the little church where my late husband and I used to help with bake sales. It was a bright Saturday in late May, and the neighborhood was already full of trimmed lawns, flags on porches, and children riding scooters down quiet sidewalks. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see pastel balloons tied to the mailbox and hear music from the backyard. Everything looked cheerful. Everything looked perfect. I balanced the lasagna in both hands and used my elbow to close the car door. Vanessa opened the front door before I could knock. Her smile appeared quickly, like something she had put on in a mirror. "You made it," she said, stepping back just enough to let me in. She wore a cream sundress and gold hoops, and her hair looked like she had spent an hour curling it. "Of course," I said. "I brought Chloe's favorite." Her eyes dropped to the pan in my hands for half a second. "Oh," she said in that light, airy tone people use when they are already dismissing you. "You really didn't have to do that." I told myself not to notice. I had done a lot of that over the past few years. Not noticing the way she corrected me in front of strangers. Not noticing how family plans changed without anyone remembering to tell me until the last minute. Not noticing how Daniel always looked tired when I brought up things that hurt me, as if my pain were just one more inconvenience in his already busy day. So I smiled and walked in. The house smelled like vanilla candles and catered barbecue. 2 folding tables had been set up in the backyard under a white canopy, with pink paper plates, mason jars full of lemonade, and a tiered birthday cake that looked too polished to be homemade. A woman I didn't recognize hurried past me carrying trays of sliders from the kitchen. Someone else was arranging fruit skewers in perfect rows. I stood there for a second, still holding my warm pan, feeling oddly out of step, like I had arrived dressed for the wrong occasion. "Just set that in the kitchen," Vanessa said, already turning toward a group of guests. "We're pretty much set on food, but we'll figure it out." I carried the lasagna to the kitchen myself. 10 minutes later, after I had hugged Chloe and handed her the gift bag and listened to her sweet, distracted thank you before her friends pulled her away, I went back inside for a glass of water. That was when I saw the black trash bag near the pantry door, tied loosely at the top. One corner of aluminum foil stuck out from the opening. There was red sauce on it, melted cheese, and one of my blue kitchen towels folded into the mess like it had never mattered at all. I did not move right away. I stood there with my hand still wrapped around the glass, watching the sauce slowly slide down the crinkled foil as if time itself had decided to become cruel. The kitchen around me was bright and spotless, every counter wiped down, every serving tray placed just so. But that trash bag near the pantry door told a different story. It told the truth no one intended for me to see. My lasagna had not been set aside because there was no room. It had not been forgotten in the rush of the party. Someone had looked at something I had made with my own hands, something meant for my granddaughter, and decided it belonged with paper napkins, plastic forks, and empty soda cans. I bent down slightly and touched the edge of the foil with 2 fingers. It was still warm. That somehow hurt more than if it had gone cold. It meant it had been thrown away almost as soon as I arrived. "Margaret, are you all right?" I straightened so quickly I nearly spilled my water. Daniel was standing in the doorway, one hand still on the frame, his car keys dangling from his fingers even though he was already home. For a moment I thought about asking him directly. I thought about pointing to the trash bag and saying, "Is this what my place in your family comes down to now?" But I looked at my son's face and saw the same expression I had seen too many times before, that cautious, exhausted look of a man who wanted peace more than honesty. So I smiled. I had become very good at smiling when something inside me was splintering. "I am fine," I said. "Just getting some water." His eyes flicked once toward the trash bag and then away so fast that if I had not been watching closely, I might have missed it. But I did not miss it. That small movement settled something cold and certain inside me. He knew. Maybe not before. Maybe not in detail. But he knew now, and he was choosing the easier road, the same road he always chose, the one where Vanessa never had to be uncomfortable, and I was expected to swallow whatever bitterness was handed to me and call it family. "Chloe loved the sketchbook," he said, as if that should smooth over everything. "That was thoughtful, Mom. Thoughtful." It was such a small word for all the years I had poured into that family. I nodded and took a sip of water even though my throat had gone tight. "I am glad." He lingered 1 second too long, then stepped aside when two of Chloe's friends ran through the hallway laughing, both of them wearing glitter on their cheeks and paper crowns tilted over carefully curled hair. Their joy was innocent. I reminded myself of that. Chloe was 13 today. Whatever had happened in this kitchen was not her doing. I would not let Vanessa's choices stain the child I loved. So I walked back outside and returned to the party as if nothing had happened. The backyard was golden in the afternoon sun. Someone had turned the music up. A cluster of mothers stood near the patio comparing summer camp plans while children chased each other across the grass with slices of watermelon in their hands. Chloe sat at the center of it all on a white folding chair decorated with ribbons, laughing with her friends, her long brown hair shining in the light. She looked so much like Daniel at that age that it caught me off guard. Same warm eyes. Same crooked smile. For one painful second I remembered birthday parties I had thrown for him in our old backyard with a sprinkler running at the edge of the lawn and a homemade sheet cake balanced on a card table. I remembered staying up half the night icing baseballs and stars across that cake because store-bought things cost more than we could spare back then. No one had cared whether the table matched or the napkins coordinated. People came hungry and grateful, and they stayed late because being together mattered more than appearances. Vanessa stepped up beside the dessert table, laughing at something one of her friends said. She looked polished, admired, completely at ease. Then she glanced at me. Just one glance. Calm. Measured. Untroubled. And in that instant I understood that the lasagna had not been thrown away in irritation or haste. It had been removed like a stain from a white dress, something she believed would ruin the picture she was trying to create. I folded my hands in front of me and kept my face still. Let her have her perfect party, I thought. Let her enjoy every carefully planned minute of it. Because by the time the candles were lit, I had already begun to see this family more clearly than I ever had before. The cake was brought out just after 4, carried by a young woman from the bakery who wore white gloves and the careful smile of someone who had been paid to make a moment look effortless. Everyone gathered around the patio table while Chloe leaned forward, cheeks pink with attention, the candles flickering in the warm breeze. I stood near the hydrangea bushes, with a paper cup of lemonade in my hand and sang along with the others, keeping my voice steady, keeping my face composed. Chloe looked happy and I held on to that. At the end of the song she glanced around the crowd and found me. For one small precious second, her smile softened into something real. "Thank you for coming, Grandma," she said, loud enough for me to hear over the applause. "Of course, sweetheart," I answered. "I would not miss it." Vanessa clapped her hands together and announced it was time for presents. The girls crowded around the gift table, all bracelets and ponytails and sweet perfume, while parents lifted phones and angled themselves for better pictures. I stayed back. I had learned by then that staying back made everyone else more comfortable. My gift bag was still off to the side where I had set it, half hidden behind 2 large department store boxes tied with satin ribbon. Chloe found it anyway. She reached in, pulled out the sketchbook, and her whole face brightened. "Oh wow," she said, flipping through the thick cream pages. "This is exactly the kind I wanted." Then she held up the watercolor pens and looked straight at me again. "Grandma remembered." She said it innocently, but the words landed harder than she knew. 'Cause yes, I had remembered. I remembered what subjects she liked in school. I remembered that she sketched birds in the margins of her homework. I remembered she preferred lemon over chocolate, and hated frosting that was too sweet. I remembered because I paid attention. I always had. Vanessa stepped in quickly then, smiling too wide. "Open the one from Aunt Rebecca next," she said, guiding Chloe's hands away as smoothly as someone redirecting traffic. The moment passed. It was done so neatly that no one else seemed to notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything now. A little later, while guests began drifting toward the driveway with leftover goodie bags and half-melted cups of ice cream, I went inside to use the downstairs restroom. The hallway was quieter now, the house carrying that worn-out feeling parties get near the end, when the laughter has thinned and the decorations start to look tired. As I came back toward the kitchen, I heard voices from the mudroom just off the garage. Vanessa was speaking to someone in a low, irritated tone. "I told you before people arrived," she said. "That homemade tray had to go. It looked completely out of place." Another woman laughed softly. "You are terrible." "No, I am practical," Vanessa replied. "I am not having a bunch of foil pans and old-fashioned casseroles in the middle of a curated party. It changes the whole feel." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. They landed with the quiet precision of something long practiced. I stopped where I was, one hand on the hallway table, and stared at the framed family photos on the wall without really seeing them. Curated. That was the word she had chosen. Not family, not warm, not welcoming. Curated. Like Chloe's birthday was a magazine spread. Like my lasagna was clutter. Like I was clutter. I should have felt shocked, but I did not. Not completely. What I felt instead was recognition. The deep and bitter kind that comes when something you have suspected for years is finally said aloud. When Vanessa came out of the mudroom and saw me standing there, she faltered for only a fraction of a second. Then she smiled that bright hostess smile again and asked whether I needed help finding my purse. "No," I said quietly. "I know exactly where everything is now." When I walked back outside, the late afternoon light had changed. It had softened into that honey-colored glow that makes everything look gentler than it is. The folding chairs were half empty now, and the little girls who had spent the afternoon shrieking with laughter were sitting cross-legged in the grass, picking through candy from their party bags. A few adults stood near the driveway saying long goodbyes in that polite, lingering way people do when they have had enough barbecue and sunshine and want to leave without seeming rude. I moved through them with a smile that felt almost weightless on my face. It was strange how calm I had become. Not because I was not hurt. I was. But the hurt had shifted shape. It was no longer confusion. It was clarity. And clarity I was beginning to understand could feel colder than pain. Daniel was near the patio, stacking paper plates into a black trash bag, while Vanessa stood beside him checking something on her phone. They looked like a team in every outward way, moving around each other with easy rhythm, speaking in half sentences, not needing to explain much. Once, years ago, that closeness had comforted me. I had thought, good, my son is loved. Good, he has built a home. I had overlooked the cost of that peace because mothers are trained to do that. We are taught to call it adjustment, compromise, letting go. We tell ourselves that every family changes when a son marries, that traditions bend, that our role becomes smaller, that this is natural. But standing there with Vanessa's words still echoing in my mind, curated, I realized something I should have admitted to myself much sooner. This had never been about natural change. It had been about erasure. Quiet, polished, socially acceptable erasure. And it had not started today. Today had only made it impossible to deny. I thought of the previous Thanksgiving, when I had offered to bring my sweet potato casserole and Vanessa replied that they were keeping the meal simple this year, only for me to arrive and find an entire spread from an upscale caterer lining the counters. I thought of Christmas morning when Chloe was 9 and I had been told the children would open gifts later in the day, then saw photos online of wrapping paper and stocking stuffers scattered across the living room floor before sunrise. I thought of the year Daniel forgot to call on my birthday until nearly 10 at night. His voice rushed, Vanessa laughing in the background while he said they had just had the craziest day. At the time, I accepted every explanation the way a person accepts small drafts in an old house. You notice them, but you tell yourself they are harmless. You put on another sweater. You keep living there. Chloe ran up to me then, sketchbook pressed against her chest. "Grandma, look," she said, opening to the first page. In quick, confident strokes, she had already drawn the cake, the candles, and a lopsided balloon arch that is beautiful. I told her, and I meant it. She smiled in that open way children do before they learn to hide their feelings to keep other people comfortable. Are you leaving soon? She asked. There was no accusation in her voice, only concern, and that nearly undid me more than anything else had. I touched her hair gently and said, in a little while, sweetheart. Just wanted to make sure you had a good day. She nodded, then lowered her voice. I was looking for your lasagna before. Mom said we already had too much food. There it was. Simple. Casual. The official version, already prepared and passed down. I kept my face steady. That is all right, I said. You can have it another time. She seemed satisfied by that and ran back toward the lawn, where one of her friends was calling her name. Another time. I heard myself say it, and something inside me settled into place. Because that was what I had been giving this family for years. Another time. Another chance. Another excuse. Another holiday where I told myself things would feel warmer if I just stayed patient and easy and useful. I looked over at Daniel again. He was tying off the trash bag now, pressing the knot tight with both hands. Vanessa said something to him and he laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just normally. That was almost the worst part. My humiliation had not interrupted their day in the slightest. It had folded neatly into it, invisible except to me. And that was when I made a quiet decision of my own. I would not confront them in the driveway. I would not cry in the car. I would not call Daniel tonight hoping for the kind of apology a man cannot give when he has spent years protecting the wrong things. I would go home. I would wash the blue towel that had been thrown away with my food. And I would begin very calmly to remember exactly what I had been giving this family that they no longer deserved. The drive home felt longer than 20 minutes. The sun had begun to lower behind the row of maple trees near the elementary school, and the light flashed through my windshield in slow golden bands that made everything outside look soft and forgiving. Inside my car, nothing felt soft. My blue kitchen towel sat folded on the passenger seat beside the empty gift bag, still faintly stained with sauce despite my attempt to wipe it clean in Daniel's laundry room before I left. I had not wanted to carry it out in plain sight, so I tucked it under my purse and walked to my car with the same steady posture I had worn all afternoon. No one stopped me. No one asked whether I was all right. Daniel hugged me quickly at the end of the driveway, a distracted one-armed hug that belonged more to habit than affection, and Vanessa called, "Drive safe," in that polished voice she used when other people were close enough to hear. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as I had left it that morning, my flower pots lined up on the porch, the kitchen curtains slightly crooked where I had brushed them aside at dawn. I let myself in, set my purse on the table, and stood there in the quiet. This was the kind of quiet I understood. Honest quiet. Not the kind that hides things. I carried the towel to the sink and rinsed it under cold water. The red stain loosened slowly, swirling down the drain in pale pink ribbons. I watched it disappear, then draped the towel over the faucet and leaned both palms on the counter. For a moment I closed my eyes. I was not crying. That surprised me more than anything. I had expected tears once I got home. The delayed kind that come after humiliation finally has room to breathe. But what I felt was sharper than sorrow and steadier than anger. I felt awake. My phone rang just after 6. I glanced at the screen and saw Evelyn Parker's name. Evelyn had been my closest friend for almost 30 years, the kind of friend who knew when I was pretending and never let me get away with it for long. We met when our sons were in Little League together and stayed close through marriages, funerals, surgeries, and all the ordinary disappointments that stack up over a lifetime. I answered on the second ring. "You are home," she said without preamble. "I could tell from your voice when you said goodbye that something was wrong." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Was it that obvious?" "To me, yes," she said. "Not to the rest of those fools, apparently." I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Almost. She threw away the lasagna. There was a silence on the other end, and then Evelyn said very quietly, "I know." I straightened in my chair. "What do you mean, you know?" "I was in the kitchen when Vanessa told that catering girl to get rid of it," she said. "You had not arrived yet. Your pan was on the counter, and Vanessa looked at it like it was an old pair of shoes someone had left in the middle of the floor. She said, 'Take that out before my guests get here. It does not fit with the menu.' I thought maybe she meant move it to the warming oven or put it away for later, but then I saw the girl carry it toward the pantry with the trash. I started to say something, Margaret. I should have said something, but everything was moving fast, and then people kept coming through the door, and by the time I realized what she had done, you were already hugging Chloe in the backyard. I did not speak for a few seconds. I just stared at the sugar bowl in the center of my table, the one with the tiny chip on the lid that my husband used to tease me about throwing away. So it was deliberate, I said at last, even though I already knew. Yes, Evelyn answered. Deliberate, petty, and mean. Her voice softened. And I am sorry. I looked out the window at the rose bushes darkening in the evening light. Do not be sorry for her, I said. Be glad I finally heard the truth in full. Evelyn exhaled. There is more, she said. After the cake, I heard Vanessa telling Rebecca that family events are easier when things feel less old-fashioned and less cluttered. She did not use your name, but she did not have to. I closed my hand slowly around the edge of the table. Less old-fashioned. Less cluttered. It was astonishing how neatly cruelty dressed itself these days. Not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. Just with tasteful language and perfect hair and a smile that stayed in place while someone erased you one careful piece at a time. Thank you for telling me, I said. I needed to hear it from someone who was not trying to protect her. Evelyn's answer came quickly. I am not protecting anyone, Margaret. And neither should you anymore. After I hung up with Evelyn, I remained at the kitchen table for a long time, not moving, not reaching for the tea kettle, not even turning on the lamp. As the room slowly dimmed around me, the house settled into its evening sounds, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the creak in the hallway floorboard near the linen closet, the faint tapping of branches against the window above the sink. For years, those sounds had comforted me. They reminded me that a home could still feel full even after children grew up and husbands passed on, and life narrowed into quieter routines. But that night, the silence asked something different of me. It asked whether I was finally ready to stop mistaking endurance for love. I thought about all the ways I had made myself useful to Daniel and Vanessa over the years. I had picked Chloe up from school when Vanessa had a dental appointment or a hair appointment or simply wanted an uninterrupted afternoon. I had kept cold medicine, crackers, and ginger ale in the pantry because there was always a chance one of the children would come over sick and need something gentle. I had paid for dance recital costumes when Daniel said money was tight that month. I had stayed up past midnight sewing a hem on a choir dress because Vanessa had forgotten until the last minute and Chloe was in tears. I had made casseroles after every soccer game, wrapped Christmas gifts, hosted Easter lunches, mailed birthday cards with crisp bills tucked inside, and never once kept score because I believed that was what family did. You gave. You adjusted. You made room. But sitting there in the darkening kitchen, I realized something that would have embarrassed me to admit even a week earlier. They had not treasured my generosity. They had organized their lives around it. My help had become part of the furniture to them, like an extra chair that was always there when needed and never noticed otherwise. And Vanessa, with her tidy words and polished smile, had done something even more efficient than rejecting me outright. She had made me feel as though the only acceptable version of myself was the one that served quietly and disappeared neatly when the picture required it. I stood up then and turned on the lamp above the stove. Its yellow glow spread across the counters and warmed the edges of the room. I opened the drawer by the refrigerator and took out the little spiral notebook where I kept grocery lists, church reminders, and birthdays. For a few seconds I just held the pen in my hand, listening to the small scratch of my own breathing. Then I began to write. Not angry things. Not speeches. Just facts. June 3rd. Dance recital costume, $84. October 18th. Emergency dentist pickup for Chloe 3 hours. Thanksgiving groceries, $132. Christmas dinner ham, green beans, pies. Spring break babysitting for full days. I turned page after page, and once I began, the memories came quickly, each one exact and ordinary and strangely painful in its precision. It was not about the money, not really. It was about seeing in ink what I had refused to see in life. Pattern. Expectation. Dependency without respect. By the time I set the pen down, the page looked almost calm. My hands did too. That was when my phone lit up again with a text from Daniel. Thanks for coming today, Mom. Chloe had a great time. He added a red heart at the end, as if affection could be inserted like punctuation and make everything sound sincere. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I placed the phone face down on the table and left it there. I did not answer that night. I did not answer the next morning either, when Vanessa sent a group text with 3 cheerful party photos and wrote, "Such a beautiful day for our girl." In one picture, Chloe stood at the center with her cake, while Daniel and Vanessa flanked her, smiling like a family in a catalog. I was visible only at the edge of the frame, one shoulder, half a hand, the blur of my cardigan near the hydrangeas. It would have stung once. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. By noon the following day, I had made 2 decisions. The first was simple. I would not volunteer anything for them again. No food, no money, no last-minute rescue. No automatic yes shaped like a mother's love. The second was harder, but it arrived with surprising steadiness. I would not announce my decision either. I would let them discover it the same way I had discovered the truth, in the quiet gap between what they expected from me and what I was no longer willing to provide. Some lessons land deeper when no one argues first. Closed the notebook, set it back in the drawer, and finally made myself a cup of tea. When I carried it to the living room, I passed the framed school portrait of Daniel at age 10, missing front tooth, ears too big, grin full of trust. I touched the edge of the frame with one finger and felt a brief ache rise in my chest. I did not miss the little boy. I missed the years before love became something he accepted without protecting. Then I sat down in my armchair by the window, wrapped both hands around the mug, and waited for the next request. I knew it would come. People always notice the absence of a thing they never properly appreciated once it stops arriving on time. The request came 3 days later, right on schedule. It was Tuesday morning, just after 9, and I was in my garden with a pair of gloves on, trimming the dead blooms from my rose bushes before the heat settled in for the day. The sky was clear, the kind of bright June blue that makes everything seem manageable from a distance. I had just filled a small bucket with clippings when I heard my phone ringing inside the house. I did not rush. I finished the stem in my hand, set the shears on the porch rail, and went in through the back door at the same pace I had used for everything since Chloe's birthday. Calm, unhurried, intentional. Daniel's name was on the screen. I let it ring twice more before I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said, in the same careful voice people use when they are about to ask for something they assume you will give. "Do you have a minute?" "I do," I said. There was a pause. Vanessa has a dentist appointment this afternoon, and Chloe's camp let out early for staff training. We were wondering if you could pick her up at 1:30 and keep her until around 6. Wondering. That word almost made me smile. Not asking because they respected my time. Not calling to check on me after what had happened. Just reaching for the old arrangement, the dependable one, the one where I quietly stepped in and made the rest of their lives run more smoothly. I looked down at the gardening gloves still in my hand, dirt caught in the seams. "I cannot. Today," I said. Silence. "Not long, but long enough." "Oh," Daniel replied. "Are you busy?" There it was. The surprise. As though a woman my age could only be unavailable if there were a specific appointment, a medical reason, a church function, some acceptable explanation that would excuse me from the role they had assigned. "Yes," I said. "I have plans." It was not even a lie. I planned to finish my roses, eat lunch on my porch, and spend the afternoon in peace. Daniel cleared his throat. "Okay. I just thought since you are usually home." He let the sentence trail off, but he did not need to finish it. I had heard the rest of that sentence in one form or another for years. Since you are usually home. Since you are retired. Since you are just one person. Since your time is more flexible than ours. Since your life should naturally bend around the needs of ours. I kept my voice even. Usually is not always. Another pause. "All right," he said finally, the warmth in his tone dimming. "We will figure something out." "I am sure you will," I answered. Then I wished him a good day and ended the call before he could circle back and try again. I set the phone on the counter and stood there for a moment, waiting to see how I felt. Guilty, maybe. Shaken. But what I felt instead was the strange, quiet steadiness of a person who has finally set down something too heavy to carry. At 1:15, Vanessa texted, "Any chance you changed your mind? The babysitter canceled and I really need help." I looked at the message while the kettle warmed on the stove. No greeting. No tenderness. No mention of the birthday. No apology. Just need. I typed back, I am not available. A few seconds later, the little dots appeared and disappeared, then appeared again. Finally she sent, understood. The word looked polite on the screen, but I could feel the irritation behind it the way you can feel a storm shift the air before the first drop falls. That evening Evelyn called to ask how I was doing, and when I told her about the pickup request, she gave a low whistle. They did not waste any time, she said. No, I answered, stirring honey into my tea. They never do. I sat by the window while we talked, looking out at the street where a little boy on a bicycle kept circling the same cracked section of sidewalk, determined to master the bump without falling. Across the road, Mrs. Hanley was watering her petunias in a faded visor, and somewhere farther down the block a dog barked twice and then settled. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary evening. It struck me then how long I had been living in a state of quiet readiness, always waiting for someone else's emergency to reshape my day. It had felt like usefulness. It had felt like love. But more often than not, it had simply been availability mistaken for devotion. The next morning Daniel sent a short message. Chloe asked why you could not pick her up. I told her you were busy. No accusation exactly, but not understanding either. I read it once and placed the phone face down on the table. Let them wonder, I thought. Let them sit for once in the small discomfort of not being the center of every arrangement. I had spent too many years cushioning the consequences of their choices. It was time for them to feel at least the edges of what I had been shielding them from, including the simple truth that my time was not a public utility. By Friday afternoon, the pattern had become clear. Vanessa posted photos from a family ice cream outing that Chloe and I had not discussed. Daniel did not call. No one mentioned the lasagna. No one mentioned the trash. No one asked why I seemed different. They had adjusted instantly, not with reflection but with mild annoyance, the way people do when a favorite appliance stops working and they are forced to improvise. I should have been hurt by that. Instead, I felt something almost like relief. Because every missed call, every clipped text, every small withdrawal only confirmed that I had read the situation correctly. I was not punishing them. I was removing myself from a role they had confused with my worth. And somewhere beneath that realization, a harder thought was beginning to take shape. The birthday had not been the first insult. It had only been the first one I had finally refused to excuse. Saturday brought the first real test. At 10 in the morning, while I was folding laundry in the hallway and listening to a sermon on the radio, my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. Not a text this time. A call. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering, then said hello in the same calm tone I would have used for anyone else. Margaret, she said, bright and breathless, as though we had spoken warmly just yesterday. I hope I am not catching you at a bad time. I looked at the basket of towels on the floor, at the afternoon I had planned for myself, at the sunlight stretching across the hall runner. I was in the middle of something, I said, but I can talk for a minute. Perfect, she replied, moving quickly now that she had secured my attention. We are hosting Daniel's regional manager and his wife for dinner tonight. Came together last minute, and I thought maybe you could help me out the way you always do. Nothing major. Just one of your baked ziti, maybe that lemon pie Daniel loves, and if you could come by around 4 to help set up, that would be amazing. Amazing. The word hung there between us, polished and effortless, as though she were offering me the pleasure of being useful rather than requesting labor she had come to expect without gratitude. I said nothing for a second, and into that silence I could almost hear her assumption settling in. She believed the old rhythm still existed. She believed she could skip over what happened at Chloe's birthday, because people like me were supposed to smooth over discomfort for the sake of family harmony. I am not able to do that, I said. Vanessa laughed lightly, the way people do when they think they have misheard something minor. Oh, it does not have to be a whole production. Store-bought is fine for the pie if you are short on time. Mostly I just need a warm dish on the table so it feels more homey. Homey. That nearly made me smile. My food was good enough to make her evening feel welcoming when important people were coming, just not good enough for her daughter's birthday once the pictures mattered. I am still not able to do that, I said. This time the silence on her end sharpened. Are you still upset about something? She asked, and the softness in her voice changed shape. It was no longer friendly. It was managerial. Controlled. Because if this is about last weekend, I think there may have been a misunderstanding. I sat down slowly on the top stair, one hand resting on the folded washcloths beside me. A misunderstanding. Such a tidy little phrase. It made cruelty sound like crossed wires, like an innocent accident nobody could be held responsible for. I do not believe there was, I said. She exhaled through her nose, not quite a sigh. Margaret, we had catered food. The kitchen was chaotic. One of the girls probably tossed the tray without realizing what it was. It was unfortunate, but it was hardly personal. I looked out through the front window at the quiet street, the neighbor's flag lifting gently in the breeze. Her explanation had all the right pieces. Plausible, polite, bloodless. It might even have worked if I had not hurt her myself, if Evelyn had not confirmed the rest, if I had not spent years learning the difference between confusion and contempt. You told someone to throw it away before your guests arrived, I said. I kept my voice low, and even the way I might mention rain coming later in the day. Nothing more. Just the fact itself. On the other end of the line, silence opened up wide and deep. When Vanessa spoke again, the warmth was gone. I do not know who has been filling your head, she said. But this is exactly why things get so difficult. Everything becomes a drama. There it was at last. Not apology. Not even denial strong enough to defend. Just irritation that I had stopped cooperating with the version of events that kept her comfortable. I stood up and lifted the laundry basket with one hand. I will not be cooking tonight, I said. And I will not be coming to set up. Daniel is counting on a good evening, she snapped before catching herself. This could really help him. Then I hope the evening goes well, I answered. My voice remained so calm that it seemed to anger her more. Margaret, honestly, I think you are being unfair. I almost laughed then, but I did not give her that much. No, I said quietly. I am being clear. Then I wished her a good day and ended the call. I stood in the hallway with the phone in my hand, listening to the sermon still murmuring softly from the kitchen radio, and felt an odd stillness settle over me. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just the clean feeling that comes when a door you have held open for too long finally clicks shut on its own hinges. An hour later Daniel called, but I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief, strained, and meant to sound reasonable. He said Vanessa was embarrassed that this dinner mattered, that everyone was under pressure, that surely we could move past one small incident. One small incident. I replayed that phrase twice, then deleted the message. Because that was the thing none of them seemed to understand yet. It had never been one small incident. It was every convenient silence that came before it, every slight I had absorbed to keep the peace, every time my effort was welcomed only when it served their image. The tray in the trash had simply given the truth a shape I could no longer ignore. And now that I had finally named it, I had no intention of shrinking back into the role they preferred. Daniel came by on Sunday afternoon without calling first. I was in the kitchen slicing peaches for a cobbler when I heard his truck in the driveway and saw his shadow pass across the front window. For one strange second, an old instinct rose in me, the familiar one that said put the kettle on, smooth things over, make this easier. But that instinct had carried too much weight for too many years, and I let it pass. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked to the front door, and opened it before he had a chance to knock. He looked tired. Not devastated, not remorseful, just inconvenienced in a way that had begun to age him around the eyes. "Mom," he said, standing there with one hand in his pocket. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He glanced around the living room as if expecting to find some visible sign that I had changed, but the room looked as it always had. The Afghan folded over the armchair, the family photographs on the piano, the bowl of peppermints on the side table that Chloe used to empty by the handful when she was little. Familiar things. Steady things. I did not offer coffee. I did not ask whether he was hungry. I simply sat in my usual chair and waited. Daniel remained standing for a moment before taking the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "Vanessa is upset," he began. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Even now, with all that had happened, he had come not to ask what his mother felt, but to report the discomfort of his wife. "I imagine she is," I said. He frowned slightly. "Mom, this has gotten bigger than it needed to." She said things came out wrong, and now the whole situation is tense. Chloe notices when things are off. I just do not understand why you are digging in so hard over one mistake. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I had carried, fed, defended, and loved through every version of himself, and I realized he truly meant what he was saying. He had reduced the whole thing in his mind because that was easier than facing what it revealed. Sit back, I told him quietly, and listen to me for once without planning your answer. He leaned back then, more surprised by my tone than my words. I folded my hands in my lap. This is not about a tray of food, I said. It is about years of being welcomed only when I am useful and dismissed when I am not. It is about being called when you need a driver, a cook, a babysitter, a check, or a last-minute solution. It is about holidays moved without telling me, plans made around me instead of with me, and your wife deciding that what I bring, what I do, and eventually who I am do not fit the picture she wants. The food was not the insult, Daniel. It was the evidence. He opened his mouth, but I raised one hand and he stopped. No. You asked why I am digging in. I am telling you. Because that birthday was not an accident. She had my dish thrown away before I arrived. She mocked it afterward. And you saw enough to know something was wrong, but you did what you always do. You looked away and chose the version of peace that costs me something and costs you nothing. His face changed then. Not dramatically. Just enough. His eyes dropped to the rug, and one hand moved over his mouth for a second before falling again. I could see the truth landing in him piece by piece, not because he had never known, but because I was finally refusing to pat it for his comfort. Evelyn told you, he said quietly. I heard Vanessa myself, I replied. Evelyn only confirmed what I already knew. The room went very still after that. Outside, somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started up and droned faintly through the open window. Daniel rubbed a hand along his jaw the way he used to when he was anxious before high school exams. She should not have done that, he said at last. It was not enough. We both knew it. But it was the first honest sentence he had offered me in a long time. No, I said. She should not have. He looked up then, and for the first time since Chloe's birthday, there was no defensiveness in his face. Only the discomfort of a man standing too close to his own failure to keep pretending it belongs to someone else. What do you want me to do? He asked. I thought about that. Once I might have wanted tears, apologies, promises, some dramatic declaration that he finally understood. But age teaches you how flimsy certain words can be when they arrive only after consequences. I want you to stop asking me to make this easier for everyone else, I said. I want you to understand that I am not stepping back into the role I had before. I will see Chloe. I will love Chloe. But I will not keep pouring myself into a household that treats my care like clutter, and my presence like an inconvenience to be managed. That season is over. He sat with that for a while. Then he nodded once, slowly, like a man signing something he did not like but could not argue against. When he stood to leave, he looked older than when he arrived. At the door he paused and said, I did not realize how much I had let slide. That is true, I answered. But now you do. He left without hugging me. Somehow that felt more honest than the quick, distracted embraces he had been giving me for years. After his truck pulled away, I went back to the kitchen and finished slicing the peaches. The afternoon light lay warm across the counter, and the house smelled faintly of sugar and fruit and cinnamon. I moved slowly, peacefully, placing each slice into the dish as if I had all the time in the world, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, that was exactly how it felt. They had thought they were throwing away a pan of homemade food. What they had really thrown away was the quiet version of me that kept showing up with full hands and no boundaries, and they were only just beginning to understand how much that had been worth. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories.